but I did. What I felt like was word. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's what it felt like. I wish that I was like, that is crazy. That's not what it was at all, right? If anything, he's probably had more of those like, what, than me, right? Because I think that what our relationship has been, and don't get me wrong, I've learned a lot from this man, more than I'll ever be able to give him, to thank him for. But in terms of our cultural exchanges, a lot of it has been like, let me explain what it's like for those of us who don't necessarily have certain privileges, for those of us who sort of walk around the world a little differently. And so he's probably had a little more of those like aha moments than I have in terms of our cultural exchange. But like I said, man, I wish that I had never heard that story before. But the truth is that I was fully accustomed. I know that story, you know, I know it well. Unfortunately. What I hope though is that all of you are like, what? Right? Then, like I hope you're like, I hope it bothers you a little bit. You're surprised by it, because then that means that good things may come. Right? You know, good things may come. That's a good question. Nobody ever asked that. Thank you.
I don't think
75,000 people. No one's ever asked that.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
I was wondering, I'm a branch manager and team librarian, and all of the Black Lives Matter type of stories have been very important to me to share with my kids. And I was kind of thinking back, and I thought, which book do I think kind of kicked this all off? And I kind of think it was How It Went Down by Kiely Magoon. It was kind of the first, in my mind, the first Black Lives Matter book. And then you guys came along, and then I felt like the door burst open after that. I feel like, you know, Dear Martin came along, and
Hate You Give,
Tyler Johnson, Hate You Give, all those. Do you see that, do you feel like because more of these stories are coming forward and people are like, yeah, this is a serious problem. These aren't people playing, talking about this. Do you feel like a lot of these books are making a difference to open people's eyes? And the movie, yeah.
One can only hope, you know. I think it's, look, I think that for me it's always difficult to know. I mean, the bluest eye,
Yeah.
you know, if you look at the bluest eye mattered big time, but the people who read the bluest eye, it affected them 20 years later, right? Like down the line, right? The people who read, you know, when Roots came out, right? 20 years later, it was sort of like, you know, this is, you know, people who read To Kill a Mockingbird. We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
The way that if you read To Kill a Mockingbird at 14, it affected you when you were 30. When you were 30 and you were like, yo, I can see the world with a wider scope, and this book means something else to me now, right? And so I don't know if we'll know. I do think that, I know I'm grateful that there are so many books that sort of create almost a separate canon about this particular issue. And I'm interested to see what these young people who are reading these books in school, how it affects their lives when they're 25 or 30 years old. I think then we'll know if there's a different kind of awareness or empathy, or even just an ability to lean into the discussion a little more forthright. Maybe we'll know then, but honestly, I don't know. I think it's hard to know.
And I think about how, I know you were using the term Black Lives Matter in its sort of social political context, or at least that's how I heard it. But I also want us, when we say that word in that context, especially those of us who are white, I want us to own that phrase for what it really means. And then therefore I think about how, yes, books that talk about police brutality in that context are important, but we should also read the entire canon of Rita Williams Garcia. We should read the entire canon of Sharon Draper. We should read all the stories that are about Black lives that matter.
Yes.
Right, outside of the political context, and own our own responses to those narratives as we're you know, moving our way through our lives as young readers and older readers. And I say that with a bit of resentment for my own past, because I can name all the books that I had in my 9th grade curriculum, and every single one of them featured a white boy as the narrative, as the main character. And the only one that was written by a woman was Ursula K. Le Guin's The Wizard of Earthsea, and the main character is basically a white boy, right? So the you know, that shapes a consciousness, and so I believe Black Lives Matter. I believe Black Lives Matter, and I want to make sure that we're talking about that in all contexts, not only the ones that are sort of highlighting it. And I'm not trying to put down any of the books that are in this group,
Right.
but it's a
Right.
response to something that's very present in our national consciousness. But let's make all of those other moments from those other stories just as in the spotlight.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because I also think what happens sometimes is, because it's a hot button topic and because it's a conversation, because we're all sort of fighting and pushing hopefully toward a more equitable world, what we forget is that behind all of these stories and behind all of these characters are people who have lives outside of this trauma.
Yes.
And so like there's, I'm far more interested in, it makes me, though I love All American Boys and I'm grateful that we wrote it, and I will always stand on this particular book, it probably means a little more to me to see some kid come up to me and say that he read Ghost, or he read Patina, or he read, right? Because it's like, because these are also Black lives that matter,
Right.
right? These are also kids who are living in the world who you may not have ever seen, right? But who share a lot of the same things that you share, even if their lives aren't exactly like yours. And I think there's value in that too. It's a good question. Something to think about.
Right, yeah.